Welcome, Letao Wang, a very, very special guest today. I'm excited to have you here to talk about your new deck, about astrology, about the tarot, but also obviously about what inspired you to create the artwork for it and, why during this time specifically, because things like that, I mean, anyone who works with astrology, I always say that it's like beyond us, the creativity just flows through us. So it's always interesting how new projects are being birthed in the world in a specific time frame. So maybe we can talk about that as well. But before I go into my own theories and interpretations of that, I want to let our guest today speak right from Hong Kong. Very excited to see what your system that you use and your tool really, is here for, and what inspired you to go down that path.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Kathy. It's awesome to be here and to connect. Usually the practice, that I've been doing in all these years professionally is called spiritual counseling. And so astrology or tarot, sometimes numerology and other type of let's say divinational systems. For me, they are the channels that I use in order to serve the purpose of counseling and therapy. And so maybe I'm a little bit different from the majority or the most of the let's say experts who work in the metaphysical and esoteric field, because to me, doing astrology or using cards to read people is not really for the sake of predicting future. It's not really just about that, but for me, because I'm a certified counselor. And so what I really want to do is therapy. Especially, I would say, it's kind of interesting transition, actually, even after I started my career as a reader, because I was actually trained by a fortune teller in Sydney, Australia, when I was in my early 20s. And he was very much a very traditional fortune teller. He was using those very, very ancient, tarot decks, right? And his shops, it's very funny, there are skulls, everywhere. So kind of funny, right? And it also kind of like, scary. So what I learned from him in the early days was all about making predictions. So how to be accurate, right? So a client will come to you and they will ask you questions and you are spot on. Those are the predictive the techniques that I learned actually from him, and the really important foundation of astrology and tarot. But throughout the years, actually, when I started to see clients one after another in a professional way, I realized that I was less interested in predicting a client's future. And I didn't care that much about their future, and I cared about their therapy. Because I really believe that what really clients need is their own ability to maneuver their own future, rather than having someone to tell them, this is what's going to happen in your life in 2 years, so deal with it.
Yeah, it's like giving people their power back straight away, because that's usually when people come to therapy or need therapy or are in demand of it, it's because they are not in their power, right? And they're not in their
100%.
power. And that's what I preach and teach all the time. Like, even with my approach to astrology, there is no prediction. Like, I can't tell you. I can see and read the energy, and then there is a spectrum of how it can manifest, but it's based on your auric field, it's based on your reactions, it's based on how you've digested the trauma or like the triggers, right? Or the activation that you have. It's basically your relationship to energy that flows through you, which is emotions, right? And so I love that.
Yeah, so 100%, right? I agree with what you just said. And so I really feel at least back then, I felt that's what I really wanted to do. And so I made my decision to go back to grad school to complete my master in counseling and clinical psychology, because I really wanted to study counseling and therapy in a very systematic way. Because sometimes you do encounter people who want to challenge you, and say, oh, you say you can do counseling, but you've never studied it. So who are you to counsel me, right? You have no academic background in that, right? So I realized that, okay, so I'm going to study it and I'm going to master it. And let's see if that was going to help with my my career better. And it did, actually. And I learned a lot back in I did my master degree with Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. And what was interesting was that when I was going through that program, I was thinking, my God, I was already totally doing all those things.
Yeah,
If you
it's
know
just
what I
like
mean.
someone telling you, or like
Yeah.
reassurance that you are. I mean, I'm a bit, very much Saturn retrograde in my chart. I have always been against labels. Like I didn't even. I would have two bachelors, but I mean, I didn't finish because I just didn't want to write a thesis, just so someone can
Yeah,
tell me, oh yeah, now you are the master. Like someone giving you a label. I'm like, I'm
absolutely.
not gonna be in a fucking box. I know my shit without it. Sorry to my language, but yeah,
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
who came up with
Sometimes,
it, you know?
yeah, yeah. But at the end of the day, right? I mean, certain organizations or certain people, they do care about that.
Yeah.
So, I didn't really want to do it for, of course, it was not to satisfy, their expectations, but it's more sort of like, something, but, of course, I did learn useful things, right? Through that program. So that was good. And even though that was a lot of investment, because, to do a master program was not cheap.
Mm.
And it took me about 18 months to finish. And so, so that's been my career path. Started as a as a pure fortune teller, as a reader, reading tarot cards, reading people's future, and then slowly I realized what I really wanted to do was therapy. And then now what I do is called spiritual counseling. So astrology and tarot were the tools that I use for as the diagnosis um, uh, part, yeah, of the session. And then slowly we move into the counseling and the talk therapy part. Yeah.
So that reminds me a lot, or like it just rings a bell, and maybe you have been diving into that too. Jungian psychology, which is all about archetypes, because the tarot and astrology archetypes,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
And then being a
Yeah.
counselor, therapist, it's like very along those
Yeah.
lines. Is that something that
Absolutely.
inspired you?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's really actually one of the, well, of course there are many, many different teachers, right? And authors who inspired me, but definitely, I mean, Carl Jung was definitely one of them. I would say that he really the books and the theories that he had, not even the my teachers, they all followed his teaching and things like that. And I was very fortunate that during my career path, I encountered 2 to 3 amazing teachers, even though they were really far away from me. They don't live in Hong Kong; they're all in the States or they're in Australia. But I really feel that those are the ones who constantly inspire us, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just one thing that they say, and you realize that, wow, okay, that's what I needed.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Do we know them?
So one of my favorite teachers that I was fortunate to actually meet in person when I was in the States was, his name was Anthony Lewis. So he was the author. He published, I would say, I think maybe 8 to 10 books with Llewellyn. So the famous Mind, Body, Spirit publisher in the US, and several books that he published. One of them was called Tarot, Plain and Simple.
Oh, I
Very
think I
this
know that. Yes.
yeah, yeah, on the cover of the book it
Yeah.
was the fool, right? So it was really early. I think that book came out in the either late 1980s or early 1990s. I mean now, I mean Mr. Lewis is in his 80s already. And there's another book, it was like this big, it's like a dictionary, it's called Tarot Beyond the Basics. And that
Mm.
was a fascinating tarot book. So yeah, so he was one of the teachers who really inspired me and who really just um I don't know. I was in awe, just by his vast knowledge and the research that he has done. So yeah.
Awesome. So I mean, I get it. I work also with, I have a lot of, but first of all, actually, I want to ask you about your top three, like your astrology, sun,
Mm,
rising. So I have a little bit of a reference.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, what's your question again? I didn't hear
Your
you.
sun, moon, and rising sign.
Oh, so my sun is Cancer. My
Oh,
moon, Yeah, I'm a Cancer sun, and moon sign same as you. I'm a Capricorn moon, and I'm a Virgo ascendant.
When is your
Yeah,
birthday? Since Cancer season, it's right around the corner.
July. Yeah, right in the middle, Cancer time. Yeah, actually, yeah. So early July. Yeah,
Awesome. I mean, yeah, you
yeah,
will have a ride this Cancer season. It's gonna be a lot. With 2 full moons in Capricorn, we love that, right? And then the
yeah,
new moon in the
yeah,
middle of it, it's gonna be interesting. So
yeah.
I want to know, I mean, being a Cancer, it makes sense, and Capricorn wanting a structure and a tool, Virgo rising wanting to serve all of these things. But why? What inspired you? Like, where comes the passion for, yeah, counseling and therapy?
Well, one of the important things on my own chart is I have my natal Chiron in conjunction with my North Node.
Ooh, I see. And the
So
Virgo rising. Wow, and where's your Mercury?
my Mercury is in the 12th house, the house of
Oh,
mysticism. So
so
that makes sense, right? Right.
yeah,
So my life path is about through studying, mysticism to achieve the art of healing. So
yeah.
that's where it all comes from. Yeah. And so, what I realized about the North Node is it's never easy, but once you do it, you gain, limitless satisfaction
Which house
through
is
that,
that?
the 10th.
Oh, I see. Oh,
Yeah. So that's really about my career path. Yeah. And I've been in denial. Not I have been, sorry, I was in denial of that for a long time in my early 20s. And I talked about this with a lot of in different podcasts as well, because it's just not a very um, ordinary profession to have due to my own cultural background and
I was just
family
about to
culture.
say it's with all of that Capricorn moon, Capricorn North Node flavor. It's probably a lot of also, I
Mm,
mean, in a way, Capricorn moons they are adults when they are born, and they always love to take care of people. Like that's just
yeah,
they had to operate, and they never had someone to take care of them, right? And so
yeah, yeah.
Cancer on top of that, I can imagine it's just it's feeling that desire for, like, not repeating what has been done to you. Like, you don't
Mm,
obviously have to answer if that's too personal, but it
mm.
usually drives our passion. And if your Chiron and North Node are together, I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, part of it is my own healing, right? So,
Yeah.
when you have Chiron, a very sensitive Chiron on your chart, the first part is, how do you deal with your own trauma and difficult past? And then through that, then we transform and
Actually, I would love to
to
focus on
right.
that, since that's interesting. I have Chiron conjunct my sun in the eighth
Yeah,
house.
okay.
So you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
Chiron
yeah.
conjunct, and Chiron in Aries right now is all about reclaiming our power also collectively. So
Mm,
maybe the Chiron has always been like, I mean, I say it's the key to healing, it's the key to everything in the chart. It unlocks all the doors. So what is your take on, you know, the deck also, but also what you've written about Chiron in the deck, and then also your personal Chiron story, because it's this wounded healer archetype that fascinates me, and I think is really important because it is an archetype, as we talked about archetypes
mm.
before, and we
Yeah,
all
yeah.
are actually meant to live that archetype in order for the collective to heal, right?
Yeah, yeah. So the Chiron, so I don't know which Oracle deck you have, the digital version. So I've published two Oracle decks, right? And so the one that has Chiron was the first one called
Mm.
Oracle of the Mythic Heroes. And so in that deck, I basically created the 40 chapters in that deck, and each chapter is talking about the story of a one Greek mortal hero. And now when I say mortal, yes, some of them are demigod, right? And they are not the typical, the 12 Olympians.
Yeah.
Because I do feel that the real treasure of Greek mythology was really in those the mortals' stories rather than in the gods. And of course, we look at the gods archetypes all the time in astrology as well. The sun, the moon, Jupiter, Saturn. But the mortal heroes were the ones really fascinated me, and Chiron was one of them in the chapter. And in that chapter, I assigned Chiron. I think it was assigned him to the constellation sign of Sagittarius. The keyword. Yeah, well, first of all, he's a centaur.
Usually it's Virgo, right? Usually
Virgo, yeah.
But it
So
makes
there are
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are different, right? Different opinions on that. I think he actually rules both. I think he rules both Virgo and Sagittarius. He rules Virgo because of the heating part, because of the because Virgo and Sagittarius are squaring each other, right? So there are two different sides of Chiron, and the Sagittarius part of Chiron is knowledge, is learning knowledge, and through
And
knowledge,
faith,
then we
faith and
yeah,
wisdom.
absolutely, yeah, faith and wisdom as well, right? And how do you bring that back to the Virgo energy to serve? So it's a bit like that, I think. And to me, I mean, my story with Chiron was all about finding my own insecurity since I was a child. Even though as a child, you never really know what that was. You just knew that you were extremely unhappy, if you know what I mean. As a kid, you can't really digest that.
No,
Things
and
you
you're
don't know
like
what that
guarded
is.
in the same way as a Capricorn moon. It's like you don't really
Yeah.
have access to your emotions anyway. So you're like,
Yeah, especially I think, did you say that you had your natal Saturn retrograde or what? Did you mention that? Okay. So actually for me, it was even more difficult. So my natal Saturn, which rules my natal moon, was stagnant. It was among those 3 days when Saturn was in between, right, forward motion and retrograde motion.
I
So Saturn
always
was
say
not
the stationing days are the most challenging ones, but also like
challenging. Yeah.
spirit pointing a finger on what you're here to learn.
Absolutely right. So because it's not moving, so really it's being right in front of you. You have to face
And
it,
with
right?
Saturn, it's like, okay.
Yeah, absolutely right. So actually Saturn is very, very important to me. I have other planets in Capricorn as well. So a lot of the things on my chart are ruled by Saturn. So the stationary Saturn definitely, I mean, played an important role specifically when I was a child because I didn't know how to digest and those feelings in me. I just thought that was it because that was the rule. And so my family is very, I mean, I have great parents, but because I was also the only child and the first child and also the only child in the family. So from my parents' perspective, I was a little bit like an experiment, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So they didn't know how to raise a kid. They didn't know what it was to be to mean being a good parent, right? So they were also experimenting things with me. And so a lot of times they were also, I wouldn't blame them, to be honest. I think they did their best. But now thinking back, okay, so they shouldn't have done that. Or, of course, if they had another child, they would have known better. But because I was the first one. And some of those things became actually my insecurity. And actually in my daily sessions with clients, I have to really, be grateful, to be honest, to a lot of the clients of mine, because a lot of times when they talk about their trauma and their wounded past, I realize that I see myself in them. And I realize, well, I totally experienced that too. And of course, in counseling, you have to really be delicate with that, because sometimes if you resonate too much, then we call that countertransference, and that's not good because you still have to know where to draw boundaries. But it definitely helped me to also see my clients as a mirror. I see myself in them and I see them in me. It's a little bit
from the
like
higher
that.
perspective, I understand that that's something we have to do in counseling, but then I come from the perspective of everything in your hologram is a mirror. So, there's always a reason. I mean, that's what I mean. I don't know how you work, but I always, after every encounter or session, I know that there was a reflection for me. Otherwise, I would not have attracted that person. And so that's the gift. Obviously, in the session, you have to be professional, but afterwards, you have to do your homework in a way and be like, okay, what was this like showing me, like revealing to me? Why did I create this situation, right?
Yeah, 100%. And then through that kind of teamwork, right? You and the clients and everything. And then eventually, hopefully, you know, for me, a good session is after the session, we are mutually empowering each other. So yeah, so they feel good. They are taking something beneficial out of the session. But as the service provider, I'm also growing together with the client. And that if I have a session like that, I'll be very, very happy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the ultimate healing on both sides, win-win, right?
Both sides, yeah. And it has to be, I think, yeah. Has to be both. Otherwise, it will not be long lasting. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your new deck. Why do you feel like it's being birthed into the world right now during this time,
Right.
the craziness that we're going through collectively?
Yeah. So the first deck, like what I said, was based on the mortal heroes and heroine stories. And the second deck is called Oracle of the Celestial Deities. Actually, it came out yesterday. Was the official release day on Amazon. Yeah.
Happy
And
birthday.
thank you. Thank you. So the second deck, Oracle of the Celestial Deities, is a sequel of Mythic Heroes. And so in this deck, it's all about the gods and goddesses. So I picked 20 archetypes from ancient Roman mythology and also astrology. And I combined astrology together with it to explain the 20 different archetypes and their spiritual significance to us. The reason why I created this deck is because I think you know, I'm sure you have used a lot of different decks, you know, in your own practice. Most Oracle decks or tarot decks are used just by itself.
Yeah.
You have a deck, you know, you use it, but the two decks that I've created, you can use them individually, but also you can actually shuffle them together. And in total, there will be 60 cards. If you put them together. And those 60 cards will contain basically complete the whole picture of ancient Greek mythology. You have mortals there, you have gods there. And so when you are putting them for a reading session to a spread, it's not just about this card means this, okay, and this card means that, but you're seeing the relationships, the interactions, the dialogue between the mortals with each other or between the mortal and the gods. And so that's actually my motivation, because I am such a huge fan of Greek mythology. And
I was
that's
just
where,
about to ask, like, how come both of your decks are very connected to that Greek, you know, mythology and like the Greek archetypes? Because, you know, some people love Babylonian teachings, like, I don't know, the Romans and like other like biblical. So how, I mean, probably lifetimes ago, but what is it about Greece?
So my first astrology teacher, when I was like 24, whom I studied under back in Sydney, Australia, was a mythologist. So the way I studied astrology at the very beginning was a little bit different from the traditional way. So you know, my teacher never started the teaching with, you know, memorizing the meaning of the planet or let's just study the house systems. It was all about storytelling. So he would tell a story about, let's say, Athena, right? Pallas Athena. And then he would ask me, so Letao, you tell me what you think Athena means on your birth chart as an asteroid. Or he would tell a story about, let's say, Hermes. And he would say, Mercury is the Roman version of Hermes. Now, what do you think this energy means to you? So my astrology study really is deeply rooted in mythology. And so that's how I see astrology. I don't see astrology and mythology are two different things. I see astrology and mythology are so intricately woven together like this, and you can't really separate them. And so sometimes during my session with clients, a part of the session was me looking at their chart, and I'm telling them stories between those different planets and why they mean certain things to them. So it's kind of unique, my way of reading people's charts. But that's really what I learned. And so that's also the reason why I created these decks, because that's what I feel most comfortable with. And I also hope more people would be able to see astrology or mythology in this way. Yeah.
I love that approach. I mean, in a way, I also explain kind of like the movie that's playing out through the planets in the chart, right?
Mm,
It's like I can see that movie and like the fight and the battle between, you know, you have Sun square Saturn or whatever. Your Sun is like battling with the daddy, whatever. But it's like, yeah, I mean, it's really much on helping, from my experience, to detach from being caught up in the story that you feel yourself trapped into.
mm,
When you see, oh, everything is just playing out like a myth and like a drama and like a play of
yeah, yeah,
characters inside
yeah,
of
yeah,
me and
yeah,
in my life, but at the same time, it's kind of like, you know, I like to bring a sense of humor in it too, being a sad
yeah,
rising. So yeah, it's very much helping us to uncouple the emotional charge here, right?
yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah.
And even when you use cards to bring an element of playfulness into it.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely, you know, for the cars, right? I mean, also depending on the artwork, right? Some clients, right, they are very much about, you know, because they can see the cars right in front of them when you're having a face-to-face session, right? So I think, you know, also I put a lot of thoughts into what kind of artwork that would be really good for the clients, easy for them to um, work with. Because sometimes, you know, certain tarot decks can be quite scary.
Yes. I mean, that's
And
usually what people associate like death and like, you know, really dark.
right. Yeah, the stereotypical, you know, concept, right?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, but especially I feel that for a lot, for some clients, they're already very skeptical from the beginning. You know, they're already either skeptical or they're a little bit scared, right? Especially if this is the first time for them to go to a professional reader. And then if you shuffle, you know, deck that is filled with, you know, scary images and they're already feeling that I don't want to listen to you.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to go home. Yeah, I don't trust you, you know, things like that. So I think it's, as professionals, it's good for us to also create that very comfortable environment for them to listen, for them to talk. Yeah.
Yeah. And to trust and to
Mm.
open up, because when we go into counseling, you know, you have to build some sort of like rapport and like, yeah,
100%. Yeah.
feeling
The
of safety.
therapeutic rapport. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. We actually spent, I remember back in grad school, we actually had two full classes just about building therapeutic relationships. Just only talking about that. And there are a lot of different techniques and things like that, right? But yeah, so yeah, definitely. They're just so important. I think once the rapport is being built, you're already 50% there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Then it doesn't even matter too much what tool you use, you know, it's like
Yeah, yeah,
they trust you. So
yeah.
on my podcast, we usually talk about, you know, also what's going on collectively. And as I mentioned, like why specific things are being birthed in a specific time period in history. You know, if you can imagine a few decades from now, we will look back at obviously 2024 and be like, okay, and then Letao published this deck and it was probably needed in this time in history because we are going through so much change also, I mean, on a Capricorn level, right? So how do you feel the connection to your greater purpose and the deck and why it wanted to be out there in the world right now in this moment?
To be honest, I never really calculated these things, and I have to
We
be very
never do. That's
honest.
what I mean. That's why we have to
Yeah,
sit there and be
yeah.
like, why was this creation, right? Because it's
Ah,
going through
uh,
you. Why did it want to come into the world now? You know?
mm, um, to be honest, yeah, I mean, I've wanted to bring something, you know, something very grounded to the public, you know, for a long time. But I was always felt I was not ready to do it. You know, there's also a part of me feeling partially this could be about, you know, am I good enough to do this? And
But you have
or
Chiron and Gemini, right?
correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, so when it comes to, you know, information and, you know, all these kind of things, right? You get a little bit insecure about whether the meaning that I'm trying to get crossed, whether that is going to be acknowledged, understood or not. And so it took me a long time to actually do that. But so when I really started doing this, the first deck, so Oracle of the Mystic Heroes, was during COVID.
Mm.
So during COVID time, I pretty much, we're all stuck at home. And, Hong Kong had very strict quarantine rules. I'm not gonna tell you how, but it's quite
I
gruesome.
mean, I can imagine.
Yeah, we're not allowed to do a lot of things here.
I
So
think back then I
um,
saw some things on TikTok, where it's like Chinese people are definitely going through things right now.
oh yeah. I mean, Hong Kong was still better because it's a what do you call that? Hong Kong is SAR, so a special administrative region. So we have our own government. But in mainland China, it was even more like strict, right? Literally, people's door were being like locked. You can't get out of your own door because the government will put things outside your door. You can't get out of your house. Well, we never had that in Hong Kong, but still it was very, very strict, right? And so during that time, I did a lot of reflection about what I wanted to do and what it means to me. And when I spend all this time at home and doing online sessions, because you're also trying to not to do face-to-face sessions, right? And and so it's just something hit me at that time. And so I started writing, even though without really the intention to really publish it. Again, that Chiron in Gemini was telling me that, you know, one
Not
of the
good
biggest
enough.
reasons
Yeah.
to be honest, one of the biggest reasons I had and the insecurity I had was because, English is not my first language. So I would have to write the guidebook 100% in English and compete with other American writers. How am I going to do that? And that's actually one of the biggest insecurity that I have. And I was even thinking, if I dare to send this to any publisher, probably I'll be making a spectacle of myself,
Well,
right?
I
Because
think for some reason we share that because I've written material for 5 books, haven't published anything because of this, in a way, similar security where it's like
insecurity. Mm.
I'm German, so also English
Yeah,
is not my first language. And
yeah.
then it's first of all the insights and what you want to share. Where like, will people think I'm crazy? Is this good enough? Like, it's this like, am I a genius or
Oh
am I
yeah,
a freak? And then at the same
yeah,
time, English is also like, does my point even come across?
yeah. Oh, I totally feel it. Yeah. So yeah, 100%. So I was even thinking, I just want to write the book maybe for myself, or I'll just see how that goes, right? And then when I really spent a lot of effort into designing it and writing it, and then not, of course, it was not a smooth path, and I made mistakes here and there, some big mistakes actually. But eventually, I think the universe was kind enough to bring me to the right publisher. And I really feel sometimes these kind of things is a little bit like finding your life partner.
Yes.
Once you find the right one, that's it. You don't need to pretend to be someone else. They
No, they
will love you
support
for
you,
who you are.
they are like
Yeah,
cheering you on.
yeah. And they will believe in you. And so I really believe, and so sometimes I feel, to answer your question earlier, right? So how does this all come together? And I always feel that, at least for me, is I don't really have to have the final goal in front of me and thinking, how am I going to get there? I just need to do something that I really want to be committed to. And my intuition, and also trust your intuition about somehow this feels right. And you just do it. But you have to make the effort first. And then the moment when the universe looks at you and be like, okay, so this kid is really trying. Okay, and the timing is right. We're gonna give him something back. And then the magic happens, right? So that's really what I think.
Yeah, and so that was the first deck, and now the second deck, which is interesting timing too, because I know, especially specifically this week in Cancer season, I talked about the connection to how all the things are surfacing from the beginning of COVID. And so you published the first one, obviously during COVID, and now the second one when I was saying like everything's coming full circle in a way, and like what we started in 2020 is going to continue or being, more like broken down by because Pluto is at the very
Yeah,
Capricorn, right? So
yeah.
how is that then linked?
Um, um, Well, I mean, this is all in hindsight, right? I mean, when I look back at how this process went, I mean, it makes a lot of sense when you're looking at the secondary progression and also the transit that is
I love
happening
that.
actually,
I love them.
right? Right, and on my own chart, and then you realize, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, this is when this planet transiting in this house in that year. Oh, that's how we sign a contract. Oh, you know, so but only in hindsight, because I also sometimes I try not to put ideas in my own mind, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if I'm sure you do that too. You look at your history, right? And you be like, okay,
I love that's the weird thing. I never really work too much with my current chart. Sometimes
yeah, yeah,
I more so I'm always in awe, like looking back in hindsight, I'm like, oh, well, that makes
mhm,
sense. Because then it's
yeah,
like I always say cosmic poetry, how everything played
mm,
out. And of course, it's
yeah,
beyond us, we are not doing
yeah,
anything.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah. So I have to trust the process, right?
Always,
There's
always.
a part trust the process. Yeah. Mhm.
So what are your current now? Obviously, that your baby's been birthed right before cancer season. What are
Yeah.
you focusing on right now, and what
Now,
is your contribution to, helping us all shift into a more peaceful, harmonious shift
yeah,
that we're going to
yeah.
have with, I mean, you can also share how you see that end of Pluto in Capricorn, and the beginning of, Pluto in Aquarius, because it is one of the biggest shifts that we will ever encounter in this life, right?
Little inquiries, to be honest, I mean, I mean, for me, I mean, to be honest, we're already seeing a lot of things, right, related to Pluto inquiries. I mean, all this, let's say, technology, AI, right? But it's already bringing a little bit suspicion and, you know, how people manipulate things taking advantage of modern technology. You know, I remember very clearly, it was several months ago, I saw something on the news. Yeah. It was about Taylor Swift and someone, you know, we don't know who that was, but someone used AI to create pornographic,
Oh my
you know,
God.
images of Taylor Swift. It was very vulgar, but it looks like real. Right. And so AI can do that. And then that person actually put those pictures on Twitter, or
Mm.
now it's called x.com, whatever you call that, right? And you know, then within several hours, you know, already millions of people have seen it. And then Taylor Swift found out, and she said she's gonna, sue this person, you know, getting lawyers and things like that. So when I saw that, I was like, this is Pluto in Aquarius. This is what this is about, you know, AI, you know, all this kind of modern technology is what Aquarius symbolizes. But when Pluto is there, we have to really be careful because Pluto can bring all kinds of manipulation, secrecy, right? Control and things like that, or what is happening behind the curtain. And specifically, I think for people who have, let's say, their natal sun, moon, Mercury, or even Venus in the very early degrees of the four fixed signs.
Mm.
Perhaps, you know, during this year, next year, the year after, you know, the next, you know, the 3 to 4 years, because Pluto is so slow, right? So, you know, possibly they also need to deal with, things related to that, you know, how they're going to deal with their own inner fear of losing control or something that they have no control over, but it's happening at the backdrop, right, of their life. Yeah, so I think that's really the theme. Yeah.
So what am I going to do? Because that means my Mercury will be affected.
Oh,
I'm
really?
Mercury at 6 degrees of Leo, so I'm like, okay, I've already been through so much with this whole Uranus and opposite my Pluto and like squaring my Sun and my Saturn. Like,
Uh,
what's coming now?
It's actually, you know what? I had a big revelation about these kind of things, yeah. Because, you know, sometimes when we're looking at a planet, like specifically Saturn or Pluto, yeah, forming an opposition or a square to our personal planet, right? The first reaction we tend to have is shit. Like, huh? You know, this is really shit, right? And we always love it when Jupiter comes, right? Jupiter transiting my sun, oh
Well,
yeah, you know, it's a bit like that.
yeah.
But I had a big revelation about that. And I realized that it's not really about what do I deal with that, but it's more about this is my opportunity to really experience this not client, sorry, to experience this planet in this position in a very real way.
I mean, and yeah,
Eh,
and in the highest, I always say Pluto is the soul. So I love
mm,
Pluto transits because it means that, you know, I'm being like, my ego is maybe a little bit afraid and like, wants to avoid. But then at the
Yeah.
highest perspective, after the end of it all, it's gonna be
Mm,
like soul will be on fire. That's also with Pluto and Aquarius. Yeah, we see all of the darkness that can be associated with technology, but
yeah.
in the highest, my highest intention for Pluto and Aquarius is that we bring soul into technology again and not make it like mean that because we can train our AI, we can
Yeah.
train the algorithm, we can infuse it with loving intentions, and we can make it work for us and not against us if we don't do it intentionally, right?
100%. Yeah. So of course, yeah, when it comes to opposition with your, natal Mercury or things like that, definitely, I mean, there are a little bit like, oh, what's going to happen? But I try to, to be honest, I mean, Saturn is going to come to a square with both my sun, moon in 2 years' time. Sign Capricorn, moon sign Cancer, moon in Capricorn. Saturn is gonna come to Aries in 2 years' time, right? 2 to 3 years' time. So what am I gonna do? Square my sun, square moon. I'm gonna die, right? So I also have this. And actually, I'm not really concerned by myself. I mean, I can look at the end of the day, we're all fighters. We're
I
all
mean, you already
survivors, right?
survived some
Yeah,
Saturn
yeah,
square, so you're not going to
yeah,
think this
yeah.
time.
But I'm concerned about my parents.
Mm.
Because I'm wondering when Saturn comes to square my sun, does that mean that my parents will leave me? Are they gonna die? Because they're old. They're both of them are in their 70s, and Sun is my father, Moon's my mother, right? And so, what does that mean, right? So naturally, there is some kind of fear at the back of my head, but I've decided not to think like that.
You're going to
Yeah.
manifest a
So
different outcome. No, no.
yeah, yeah. So and actually these days, if I call them, I'll tell them, ask them to be healthy, I'll try to recommend, supplement for them to take whatever, that is good for old people, if they say they have some symptoms, because I always believe that Saturn is all about learning lessons, right? So let's say when someone gets sick, well, it means that they never took care of themselves. And that's why when Saturn comes, boom, everything comes out. But if they have been taking good care of themselves, it might not necessarily be that way. And so, yeah, so I'm just trying to do all these kind of things to alleviate
I
the
love that. It's
potential.
like so,
Yeah.
your archetypes literally playing out. You call your parents, right? In a way where you are the parent, Capricorn moon, giving them health advice, Virgo rising, because you care for them so
Yeah.
much, Cancer. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
mommy, let me, be
Yeah.
the adult for a second and give you health advice.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. Also because, I don't have a big family. It's just me and my parents. That's it. We don't have any, other, anybody else in the family. I have no siblings. And so, that's the only people that I care about. I'm not married. I'm single. So that's it. My parents are the most important people to me, and also me, myself. And that's it. So,
Sure.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, family and
Yeah.
roots are always
Anyway.
important. So
Yeah.
before we wrap it up, and thank you for filling us in and inspiring us to look more into mythology as well. And yeah, let us know if there's do you have any last words for people helping shift into, this new paradigm? Maybe also, it's interesting because it's like I see a lot of archetypal wisdom coming back, like even myself doing a lot of research. What do you think we can learn from those myths? And then also, yeah, give us some
Mm.
last words maybe that you would like for
Yeah.
everyone to take away.
So yeah, so before we end the session, I think I always believe that, for all the archetypes, right? The heroes and heroines and god and goddesses, you can call them real, where some people believe they were purely, fictional, in the past. But either way, they were a very clear reflection of our human mind. Whether Hercules existed or not, that's not the point. But somehow we constructed that hero in ancient Greece, and still, even today, after thousands of years, we're still talking about Hercules. We still make him into movies and things like that. And so I believe that the archetypes are still happening these days as well. And they're not just stories. And that's also the reason why every year, no matter how busy I am, I will make a trip to Greece. I will actually visit those ancient ruins and temples. And hopefully that will help me to continue to reconnect with those archetypes. And so I would encourage our audience, your audience, for this episode to always connect with their inner hero and heroines, whether that's in ancient Greece or the rustic island of Sicily in Italy, or maybe in their own culture. I believe that those are the things that will always be able to inspire us. And finally, of course, if you want to read them, please check out my 2 Oracle decks, Mythic Heroes and also Oracle of the Celestial Deities, which both are available on Amazon now. The guidebooks are very detailed. I also did a little bit of Greek mythology, my own rendition of the storytelling. So if you like them, feel free to check them out.
I will obviously link everything down below. And please, everyone who listens, with Chiron, give this Chiron and Gemini some kudos for his, courage to publish and to be out there despite the fears. It's not easy. Everyone with Chiron and Leo, it's a similar thing where you're like, my creativity is never good enough. So we love to have some feedback, and if you play with the cards, if you play with the myths, then definitely give it back to the creator here. Thank you so much, Letao, for that insight and your creation, you showing up for the world, and inspiring us to go back into our minds and visit all of these myths again.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for having me today. Please do keep in touch.
Of course, of course.
Mm-hmm.